A 30-year-old Filipino crypto trader stole $90 million from an Emirati investor who raped her 19-year-old sister, who worked for him as a maid, 8 years ago, after which the girl became pregnant and eventually committed suicide. For refusing to return the money, she was paralyzed from the neck down by an injection into her spine and left in the desert, while the $90 million remained permanently locked in crypto wallets that she cannot physically access. Cristina Mendoza began working with cryptocurrencies in 2013 when she was 21 years old. She lived in Manila, in the Quezon City area, in a small apartment with her mother and younger sister. After graduating from college with a degree in information technology, she was unable to find a job in her field and took a job as an administrator at an internet cafe. Her salary was $300 a month. In her spare time, she read forums about a new technology called blockchain and a digital currency called Bitcoin. She assembled her first mining computer from used components purchased at the Green Hills Market. She spent $250 on it, which she had saved up for 6 months. The computer stood in her room and ran around the clock. In the first month, she mined 0.17 bitcoins. At that time, 1 bitcoin was worth about $100. It was pocket change, but Cristina understood the potential of the technology. She studied Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, learned about algorithms, and followed the development of the project. By 2015, she was already running a small farm of 8 video cards located in her neighbor's garage for a fee of $50 a month. Bitcoin had grown to $400, and her savings amounted to about $8,000. She quit her job at the internet cafe and focused entirely on cryptocurrencies. In 2017, when Bitcoin skyrocketed to $20,000, her portfolio reached $240,000. She bought an apartment for her mother and started trading on crypto exchanges. Cristina was self-taught. No one taught her technical analysis or the basics of trading. She watched instructional videos on YouTube, read articles, and analyzed charts for 12 hours a day. Gradually, she developed her own strategy based on reading market sentiment and analyzing trading volumes. By 2020, her portfolio was worth about $700,000. She traded not only Bitcoin, but also altcoins, participated in initial coin offerings, and invested in decentralized finance projects. In small crypto communities, she was known by the nickname Crypto Queen PH. She had a small but loyal audience on Telegram, where she sometimes shared her predictions. She never took money for advice or sold courses. She simply shared her experience. By 2025, her portfolio had reached $3 million. She decided it was time to broaden her horizons. Dubai seemed like a logical choice. The United Arab Emirates was actively developing the crypto industry, creating a favorable regulatory environment and attracting international companies. Dubai was home to the largest crypto exchanges, conferences, and investments. Cristina obtained an investor visa, rented an apartment in the Dubai Marina area, and began attending industry events. At a conference at the Dubai World Trade Center in March 2025, she met Ahmed Al-Mansouri. He was 56 years old. He managed a family investment fund with assets valued at $2 billion. The fund invested in real estate, construction, and energy, traditional industries, stable incomes. But Ahmed saw that the world was changing. Cryptocurrencies were no longer a marginal topic. Institutional investors were entering the market, governments were creating regulatory frameworks, and blockchain technology was being introduced into the banking sector. They met at a panel discussion on the future of decentralized finance. Cristina was speaking as an independent expert. Her speech was short but informative. She talked about the technology without unnecessary hype, explained the risks, and described the real opportunities. After the panel, Ahmed approached her, introduced himself, and asked for her business card. A week later, his assistant called her and invited her to a meeting at the fund's office. The office was located in the Burj Khalifa Tower on the 72nd floor. Panoramic windows, a view of the entire city. Ahmed explained that he wanted to diversify the fund's portfolio and enter the crypto industry, but did not understand the technology deeply enough. He needed a consultant to help him understand, create a strategy, and manage assets. He offered a 6-month contract with a salary of $30,000 per month. Christina accepted the offer. The work began with the basics. She explained to Ahmed the principles of blockchain, the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and the concept of smart contracts. He was an attentive listener and asked the right questions. After a month, they moved on to the practical side. They created corporate wallets, set up a security system, and started making small investments. First, $100,000 in Bitcoin, then another $200,000 in Ethereum. The market grew, and the profit was 20% in the first 2 months. Ahmed was satisfied. He increased the investment to $1 million, then to $5 million. Christina managed the funds conservatively, without taking unnecessary risks. She kept most of it in large coins and distributed small amounts to promising projects. By the end of the 3rd month, she was managing assets totaling $20 million. She often visited the fund's office, met with Ahmed, and discussed strategy. Sometimes he invited her to business dinners, where she explained the basics of cryptocurrencies to his partners and acquaintances. Emirati businessmen showed interest but were cautious. It was too unfamiliar a field for them. Ahmed, however, trusted Christina. She did not make empty promises, did not promise super profits, and always told the truth about the risks. About 30 people worked in the office: lawyers, financial analysts, accountants. Christina had little contact with them. Her workplace was in a separate office with 3 monitors and a powerful computer. She spent most of her time analyzing the market and monitoring positions. Sometimes Ahmed would come in, sit down next to her, and ask her to show him how she made decisions. He wanted to understand the logic, to learn to see what she saw. One day in late June, as they were discussing a new decentralized exchange project, a young Filipino woman entered the office with a tray of coffee. She placed the cups on the table, bowed, and left. Christina didn't pay much attention to her, but a few minutes later she asked Ahmed who the girl was. He replied that she was one of the domestic workers who were sometimes sent from his residence when the office was short-staffed. That evening, Christina happened to meet the girl in the elevator. They spoke in Tagalog. The girl's name was Maria. She was 23 years old, and she had been working in Ahmed's house for 2 years. She said that the working conditions were good, she was paid regularly, and she was treated normally. Christina asked if she had met other Filipinas in this house before. Maria replied that several workers had come and gone during her time there, but she didn't remember anyone in particular. The next day, Christina was looking through old photos on her phone and came across a picture of her younger sister, Rosa. The photo was taken in 2017, shortly before Rosa left to work in Dubai. She was 19 at the time. She got a job as a domestic worker through an agency. The contract was for 2 years, with a salary of $400 a month. For a Filipino family, that was good money. Rosa was 12 years younger than Christina. She was a cheerful, lively girl. She dreamed of saving money, returning home, and starting a small business. But something went wrong. 8 months after arriving in Dubai, Rosa suddenly returned home. She was 4 months pregnant. She didn't want to talk about what had happened. She withdrew into herself and hardly left her room. Her mother tried to find out who the father of the child was, but Rosa remained silent. 2 weeks after her return, $50,000 from an unknown sender was deposited into the family's account. No explanation, no documents. Christina was too busy with her own affairs at the time, just starting to earn serious money from cryptocurrencies. She assumed that Rosa had gotten into some kind of unpleasant situation. Perhaps her employer had taken advantage of her, and the money was payment for her silence. But she didn't know for sure. Rosa gave birth to a boy, but motherhood did not bring her joy. She fell into a deep depression. She hardly interacted with her child, did not leave the house, and refused the help of a psychologist. In 2021, when the boy was 3 years old, Rosa took a large dose of sleeping pills. She was found in her bed in the morning. There was no note. After her death, Christina tried to find out what had happened in Dubai. She contacted the agency that had found Rosa a job, but they said that the documents had been lost and they couldn't remember any details. Christina suspected that her sister had been raped, but there was no evidence. Rosa never named the man who had ruined her life. The money in the account had been transferred through an offshore company, and it was impossible to trace the sender. Now, working for Ahmed, Christina began to notice details. There were photographs from different countries hanging in his office. In one of them, she saw a house that looked familiar. Another time, when Ahmed was talking on the phone, she heard him mention a recruitment agency for domestic staff from the Philippines. It was the same agency that Rosa had used. Christina began her own investigation. She couldn't ask Ahmed directly about Rosa, as it would have seemed suspicious. Instead, she decided to proceed methodically. First, she needed to make sure that her sister was indeed working in Ahmed's house. The staffing agency was called Golden Homes Services. The office was located in Deira, in the old part of the city. Christina went there on one of her days off. The agency manager, a 50-year-old man named Rajesh, didn't want to say anything at first. He cited client confidentiality. Christina offered him $1,000 in cash for the information. Rajesh looked at the money, thought for a few seconds, and asked her to wait. He returned 10 minutes later with a folder of old documents. The folder contained a contract in the name of Rosa Mendoza. The start date was July 2017. The employer's address matched one of Ahmed's residences in the Emirates Hills area. The contract was standard. The duties of a domestic worker, a salary of $400 a month, room and board at the employer's expense. The contract was terminated early in March 2018. Reason for termination: personal circumstances of the employee. Christina photographed the documents on her phone and asked Rajesh if he remembered this girl. He replied that hundreds of employees had passed through the agency over the past 8 years, and it was impossible to remember them all. But he added that sometimes there were problems. Employers from wealthy families believe they can do whatever they want with their staff. The agency tries to protect its people, but this is not always possible. When it comes to influential families, you have to turn a blind eye to many things. Christina asked if there had been any complaints from Rosa. Rajesh shook his head. He said that if there had been any official complaints, they would have been recorded. But often the girls don't complain. They are afraid of losing their jobs, afraid of deportation, afraid of revenge. Some just keep quiet and endure. Then they leave and try to forget. The next step was to find other workers who had worked in Ahmed's house at the same time. Christina asked Rajesh to give her the contact details of the Filipinas who had worked there between 2017 and 2019. He said he couldn't just hand out personal information. Christina put another $2,000 on the table. Rajesh wrote down 3 names and phone numbers on a piece of paper. The first woman she contacted had already returned to the Philippines and was working as a teacher in the province. She remembered Rosa. She said they had worked together for about 2 months. Rosa was a quiet girl, worked hard, and hardly ever complained. But at some point she became withdrawn and cried a lot. The other workers tried to find out what had happened, but she wouldn't say anything. Then she suddenly left. There were rumors that one of the men in the house had raped her, but no one knew for sure. The second woman had worked as a cook in Ahmed's house for 3 years. She still lived in Dubai and agreed to meet with Christina in a cafe. Her name was Lucia, and she was 48 years old. She said that the atmosphere in the house was tense. Ahmed was often rude to the staff, especially to young girls. His wife lived separately and rarely visited. There were always guests, business partners, and relatives in the house. Lucia remembered Rosa. She said that the girl often looked frightened. Once, Lucia saw Rosa coming out of Ahmed's office with teary eyes. She asked what had happened, but Rosa just shook her head and ran to her room. A few weeks after that incident, Rosa disappeared. Lucia was told that she had quit and gone home. No goodbyes, no explanations. Lucia suspected that something serious had happened, but she didn't ask. In such houses, it is better not to ask unnecessary questions. She had seen other workers who tried to complain or interfere in the family's affairs get fired. They were deported without compensation, sometimes even without being paid their wages for the last few months. The third woman refused to talk. She said she had signed a non-disclosure agreement and didn't want any trouble. She hung up the phone. Christina didn't insist. She already had enough information to understand the situation. Her sister had indeed worked in Ahmed's house. Something had happened between them. Rosa had become pregnant and returned home. The family had received $50,000 for their silence. Now it remained to be seen whether this was an isolated incident or whether Ahmed had a habit of exploiting young workers. Christina began researching public records and social media. She found Ahmed's wife's Instagram profile. The woman lived in a separate villa, traveled frequently, and posted photos from Europe and Asia. They had 3 children, all adults living abroad. The marriage existed formally, but the spouses hardly ever saw each other. In one of her conversations with colleagues at the office, Christina heard talk that Ahmed had had problems with the police in the past. One of the foundation's lawyers mentioned that in 2010, a case had been brought against Ahmed based on a complaint from an Indian worker who accused him of sexual assault. The case was closed after a few weeks. The woman withdrew her statement and left the country. The lawyer spoke of it as an unfortunate misunderstanding that was quickly resolved. Christina realized that her sister was not the only victim. Ahmed systematically used his position and power to avoid consequences. Money, connections, and influence allowed him to close any case. $50,000 was pocket change for him. It was the price he paid for the right to destroy lives. The anger that had been building up in her since her sister's death now had a specific target. She couldn't go to the police. There was no direct evidence. Rosa was dead. Witnesses were afraid to speak, and documents had been destroyed or hidden. Even if she tried to file a report, the case would be closed as quickly as the previous ones. Ahmed was untouchable. His family had owned businesses in the Emirates for 3 generations. He had connections in the government, the police, and the judicial system. But Christina had something the other victims didn't. She had access to his money. She managed the fund's crypto assets, which by then had grown to $120 million. Ahmed trusted her completely. He didn't understand the technology well enough to monitor every transaction. He relied on her honesty and professionalism. Christina decided that the money would be a tool for revenge, not just to steal and disappear. She wanted Ahmed to feel helpless, to understand what it meant to lose what was important to him. For him, money was not just a means to an end. It was an expression of power, status, and influence. Taking away a significant part of his fortune meant hitting him where it hurt. She began planning the operation at the end of August. First, she studied the fund's security system. Crypto assets were stored in 2 types of wallets. Cold wallets contained the bulk of the funds, about 90 million. They were offline, accessible only to Ahmed and the fund's chief financial officer. Hot wallets were used for daily operations, trading, and quick transactions. They contained about $30 million. Christina had full access to the hot wallets and partial access to the cold wallets through a multi-signature system. The multi-signature system required 3 out of 5 signatures to complete large transactions. 5 people had keys: Ahmed, the CFO, the fund's chief lawyer, an external auditor, and Christina. To transfer funds from a cold wallet, the consent of at least 3 of them was required. This was standard security practice for institutional investors. Christina understood that it was impossible to steal money directly from cold wallets. She had to find another way. She began to study cryptocurrency laundering schemes, anonymous services, and technologies for bypassing blockchain analysis. She read forums on the darknet where methods of concealing transactions were discussed. She studied the work of mixers, which mix coins from different users, making it impossible to trace the origin of the funds. The main problem was that the Bitcoin and Ethereum blockchains are public. Every transaction is recorded and available for analysis. Blockchain analytics companies can track the path of coins through dozens and hundreds of wallets. Even if mixers are used, there are methods of de-anonymization through analysis of time patterns and transaction volumes. Christina found the solution in the anonymous cryptocurrency Monero. Unlike Bitcoin, Monero transactions are completely private. A technology called ring signatures hides the sender, the recipient's address, and the transfer amount. Even with full access to the Monero blockchain, it is impossible to determine who sent what to whom. This made Monero the perfect tool for laundering funds. The plan began to take shape. She would create a conversion chain: Bitcoin to Monero, Monero to stablecoins, stablecoins to anonymous wallets registered via VPN and disposable emails. She would use decentralized exchanges that do not require identity verification. She would break a large sum into thousands of small transactions through hundreds of intermediate wallets. By the time the theft was discovered, the money would have passed through so many intermediate points that it would be virtually impossible to trace. But the main problem remained: how to access the funds from cold wallets. She could only steal 30 million from hot wallets, but that wasn't enough. She wanted to take a significant portion to make the blow as painful as possible. The solution came unexpectedly. In mid-September, Ahmed announced that he was planning a major reorganization of the crypto portfolio. He wanted to exit several positions and reallocate funds to new projects. This required moving a significant portion of the assets from cold wallets to hot wallets for transactions. Ahmed asked Christina to prepare a portfolio restructuring plan. Christina saw an opportunity. She proposed a scheme that required transferring $90 million from cold storage to working wallets for subsequent conversion and reinvestment. The process was expected to take several days. The funds would be temporarily held in hot wallets, to which she had full access. Ahmed agreed to the plan. The start date for the operation was set for September 25th. Christina had 3 weeks to finalize the preparations. She created a network of 250 crypto wallets on different blockchains. She used a VPN, the Tor browser, and disposable SIM cards. She registered on 20 decentralized exchanges under fictitious names. She wrote scripts to automate transactions. Everything had to happen as quickly as possible. The less time that passed between the theft and its discovery, the more difficult it would be to stop the transfer of funds. At the same time, she began to prepare her escape. She ordered a fake Indonesian passport through a contact on the darknet for $80,000. The passport was high quality, with a real chip and biometric data. It had her photo, but with a different name: Siti Nurhaliza, 32 years old, citizen of Indonesia. She booked a ticket for a flight from Dubai to Jakarta for the evening of September 25th. She rented an apartment in Jakarta through an anonymous service, paying in cryptocurrency for 3 months in advance. From Indonesia, the plan was to move to South America, Paraguay or Bolivia, countries without extradition treaties with the UAE. There she could live peacefully, obtain new documents, and start a new life. $90 million in cryptocurrency would provide for her for the rest of her life. She could help her mother, provide for her nephew, Rosa's son, and give him the best education and future. On September 23rd, Ahmed announced that he was leaving for Abu Dhabi for a business meeting with representatives of the Emirates Sovereign Wealth Fund. The meeting would last 2 days. He would return on the evening of the 25th. He asked Christina to begin the operation to transfer the funds in his absence. Everything was ready. The CFO and lawyer had already signed the authorization to move the assets. All that remained was to perform the technical operations. On the morning of September 25th, Christina arrived at the office at 6 o'clock. The office was empty, and the security guard was dozing on the first floor. She went to her office, turned on the computers, and checked all the systems. The funds from cold storage had already been transferred to working wallets the previous evening. $120 million in Bitcoin and Ethereum were sitting at addresses to which she had full access. At 7 in the morning, she activated the scripts. The automatic process began. The funds were divided into small parts and sent to intermediate wallets. From there, they were converted to Monero through decentralized exchanges. Monero was sent through a chain of addresses, then converted to stablecoins and distributed to the final wallets. The whole process took 4 hours, 250 transactions per second. By 11 in the morning, the operation was complete. Christina transferred $90 million. She left the remaining 30 untouched so as not to arouse immediate suspicion. The security system only detected unusual activity at 11:30. Automatic alerts went to the phones of the CFO and Ahmed. But by that time, the money had already passed through 20 intermediate points and been converted into Monero. It was impossible to track. The fund's CFO called Christina at noon. He asked why the system was recording massive transactions that had not been approved. Christina calmly replied that she was implementing the portfolio restructuring plan that had been approved by Ahmed. The director said that all operations should be stopped immediately until the situation was clarified. Christina replied that she had already completed most of the work and that everything had gone according to plan. 20 minutes later, the director called back. His voice was tense. He said he couldn't find the funds in the working wallets. He asked where she had transferred the money. Christina said that everything was documented in the reports, which she would send by email. She hung up the phone. She gathered her personal belongings, left the office, and went to her apartment. She had 5 hours before her flight. She packed a pre-prepared backpack with the bare minimum, took her fake passport and some cash. She deleted all the data from her personal phone and threw away the SIM card. She turned on a new phone with an Indonesian number that she had bought 2 weeks ago. She called a taxi to the airport. Check-in at the airport went smoothly. The immigration officer checked her passport, looked at the photo, and scanned the document. The system did not issue any warnings. Christina proceeded to the departure area. The flight was scheduled to depart at 6:30 p.m. She sat down in a cafe, ordered coffee, and waited. At 5 p.m., Ahmed returned to Dubai from Abu Dhabi. The CFO called him and informed him of the situation. At first, Ahmed did not understand the scale of the problem. He thought there had been a technical glitch or a system error. He arrived at the office and gathered a team of security specialists. They began checking the transactions. By 6 p.m., it became clear that this was not a mistake. $90 million had been transferred through a complex network of wallets and exchanges. The funds had passed through Monero, which made them virtually impossible to trace. Ahmed tried to call Christina. Her phone was turned off. He sent people to her apartment. The apartment was empty. Her belongings had been taken. Ahmed called the fund's head of security. He was a former Dubai police officer named Salem, who had been working for the fund for the past 5 years. Salem immediately realized that Christina had fled. He contacted his contacts at the immigration service and asked them to check whether she had left the country. An hour later, the answer came. There had been no flights registered under the name Christina Mendoza in the last 2 days. This meant that she was either still in the country or had used false documents. Salem requested the surveillance camera footage from Christina's apartment. The cameras recorded her leaving the house at 2:30 p.m. with a backpack. She got into a taxi. They tracked the car to the airport. They requested the camera footage from the terminal. They found her on the footage. She checked in for a flight to Jakarta, but her passport was Indonesian, not Filipino. By that time, the plane had already taken off. Christina was in the air. Ahmed was furious. He had spent years building a reputation as a reliable investor. The loss of $90 million was not just a financial blow. It was a blow to his reputation, to the trust of his partners, to his family's status. News of the theft would quickly spread in the business circles of the Emirates. He would be considered a naive old man who had been deceived by a young Filipina. He couldn't go to the police. An official investigation would mean publicity. The case would be in the media. The fund's investors would start asking uncomfortable questions about the security system. The damage to his reputation would be greater than the financial losses. Ahmed decided to act through private channels. He had connections in the criminal world. Years of working in business had taught him that sometimes problems are solved not through the courts, but through people who work in the shadows. He knew people who specialized in finding fugitives, returning stolen property, and resolving sensitive issues. These people didn't ask unnecessary questions and didn't leave any traces. Ahmed contacted a man named Farouk. Farouk was the coordinator of a network of bounty hunters that operated throughout Asia and the Middle East. His people found debtors, fugitive businessmen, and criminals hiding from justice. They worked quickly, efficiently, and expensively. Ahmed offered $5 million for Christina's capture and the return of the stolen funds. Farouk accepted the order. He had contacts in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines. Agents at airports, hotels, and police stations. People who, for money, provided information about the movements of foreigners. He started by checking all flights from Dubai to Jakarta on September 25th. He found a flight on which a woman with an Indonesian passport in the name of Siti Nurhaliza had departed. The photo in the passport matched the image of Christina from the Dubai airport surveillance cameras. Farouk's agents in Jakarta began their search. They checked hotels, hostels, and rental apartments. Christina was cautious. She did not register at hotels, did not use credit cards, and did not communicate via social networks. She rented an apartment through an anonymous service and paid with cryptocurrency. She bought food in small shops and paid in cash. She didn't go out unless she had to. But even the most cautious people make mistakes. Christina knew her mother was worried. Before she ran away, she told her mother that she was going on a business trip for several months. She didn't explain the details and asked her not to worry. Her mother wrote her messages every day, asking how she was doing and when she would be back. Christina didn't reply, so as not to leave any digital traces. But 3 weeks after her escape, on October 16th, she couldn't take it anymore. She logged into her old email account at a public library in Jakarta. She just wanted to check if there were any urgent messages from her mother. She spent 2 minutes online, read the letters, and left. She didn't send a single reply, but that was enough. Farouk's agents were tracking all of Christina's known accounts. As soon as she logged into her email, the system recorded her IP address. The library was in the Menteng district, central Jakarta. The agents began monitoring the area. They checked the library's surveillance cameras. They found her on the recording. She left the library at 2:20 p.m. and walked south. For the next 3 days, the agents patrolled the area within a 2-kilometer radius of the library. They checked the faces of passers-by, comparing them to Christina's photo. On October 19th, one of the agents spotted her at the market. She was buying vegetables and fruit. The agent did not detain her on the spot. There were too many witnesses. Instead, he followed her to her apartment. He wrote down the address and passed the information on to the coordinator. That same night, a group of 4 people arrived at the house. They waited for Christina to go out. Early in the morning, she went out to buy bread at a nearby bakery. They grabbed her on an empty street as she was returning. They covered her head with a bag, tied her hands, and pushed her into a van. It all took less than 30 seconds. No one saw, no one intervened. Christina was taken to an industrial area on the outskirts of Jakarta. There she was placed in a container with minimal amenities: a mattress, a bucket, bottles of water. The container was loaded onto a cargo ship bound for Dubai via Singapore. The journey took 12 days. Christina remained in the container the entire time. She was fed twice a day and given water, but was not allowed outside. The ship arrived at a private port in the Emirate of Fujairah on November 3rd. The container was unloaded at night and transported by truck to the desert. The villa was located in the Rub al-Khali Desert, 300 kilometers from Dubai. It was an old residence that Ahmed's family used for hunting. It was an isolated place, with the nearest settlement 50 kilometers away. When the container was opened, Christina was exhausted. 12 days in a confined space, minimal food, heat. She was taken out of the container and brought to the house. Ahmed was waiting for her there. He had flown in by helicopter especially for this meeting. With him were 3 guards and a man in a medical gown. Ahmed sat in a chair and looked at Christina silently for several minutes. Then he asked where the money was. Christina did not answer. He repeated the question. She said she would never return it. Ahmed stood up and came closer. He asked if she understood what he could do to her. Christina looked him in the eyes and said it was for her sister Rosa, for what he had done to her 8 years ago. Ahmed stopped. He stood silently for a few seconds. Then he asked who Rosa was. Christina told him. She explained that Rosa had worked in his house in 2017, that he had raped her, and she had become pregnant, that the family had received $50,000 for their silence, that Rosa had committed suicide 4 years later because she couldn't live with what had happened. Ahmed listened without emotion. When Christina finished, he shrugged. He said he didn't remember this girl. Dozens of Filipinas had worked in his homes over the years. If anything had happened, it didn't matter. The money had been paid. The case was closed. Christina had no right to steal 90 million from him because of some maid he didn't even remember. He asked again where the passwords for the crypto wallets were. Christina refused to answer. Ahmed nodded to the guards. They tied her to a chair. The next 3 days were spent in continuous interrogation. Ahmed came twice a day and asked the same questions. Between his visits, the guards used pressure tactics. They didn't let her sleep, poured water into her nose and mouth, and used a stun gun. Christina lost consciousness several times, but when she came to, she repeated the same thing. The money would never be returned. On the 4th day, Ahmed made a decision. He realized that Christina would not break. She was ready to die, but she would not give up access to the funds. He could kill her, but that would not bring the money back. 90 million was lost forever, but he could punish her so that she would regret not dying. Ahmed ordered a man in a medical gown to be brought in. He was a military surgeon named Kamal, who had previously served in the armed forces and now worked for private clients. Kamal brought a case with medical equipment. Inside were syringes, ampules with drugs, and surgical instruments. Ahmed explained to Christina what was about to happen. He said that she wanted to destroy his life, to take away what was important to him. Now he would take away what made her human. The ability to move, to work, to live independently. She would remain alive, but it would be an existence, not a life. Kamal injected Christina's spine at the level of the 4th cervical vertebra. The drug was a neurotoxin that destroyed the nerve connections between the brain and the body. The process was irreversible. After a few hours, numbness began in her arms and legs. By the next morning, Christina could not move her arms or legs. The paralysis spread from her neck down. She could feel her body, but she could not control it. Ahmed ordered her to be taken to the desert and left near the road where Bedouins pass in the morning. She was laid in the shade under a tree with a bottle of water left nearby. 3 hours later, she was found by locals who were transporting goods to the nearest town. An ambulance was called. Christina was taken to Fujairah Hospital. The doctors did not understand what had happened. The paralysis was complete and irreversible, but the cause was unclear. The tests showed nothing unusual. Christina was conscious and able to speak, but she could not move anything below her neck. She told the police that she had been kidnapped in Jakarta, held in a container, brought to the UAE, tortured, and given an injection. The police began an investigation, but quickly reached a dead end. There was no evidence of kidnapping. Surveillance cameras in Jakarta did not record anything suspicious. The ship on which she was allegedly transported could not be identified. The villa in the desert belonged to an offshore company that had no direct connection to Ahmed. His alibi was flawless. On the days of the alleged torture, he was in Abu Dhabi for business meetings, which was confirmed by documents and witnesses. Christina was deported to the Philippines a month after she was found. She was placed in a state hospice in Manila, where she is under constant supervision by nurses. Her mother visits her every day. Her nephew, now 7 years old, does not understand why his aunt cannot move. $90 million remain in Christina's crypto wallets. She remembers all the passwords and can dictate them, but she is physically unable to enter them into a computer or phone. The money is frozen forever. Ahmed did not get it back. Christina cannot use it. It simply exists in digital space, inaccessible to both parties. That's all, friends. This is the real price of revenge in the modern world. Technology provides new opportunities, but old methods of violence still work. If this story made you think about the limits of justice and the consequences of choices, like and subscribe to the channel. Every other day, we tell stories that don't make the news. Investigations, documents, evidence. No embellishments, just facts. Share this material if you think such stories should be known. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next investigation. Your attention to these topics is important.